Hey my favorites, this is Magic Mentor with a new study vlog. Hope you all are benefited by this. Today's topic is communication. Well, communication is a dynamic process, as you all know, and it takes place around us all the time. In fact, 70% of our time is spent in communication. Now, if you feel communication means conversation, then I must say you are highly mistaken. So, let us know more about communication. What is communication? What is the process of communication? What is the origin of the word communication? Let's first look into the origin of the word communication. As we can see, the word communication comes from the Latin word communicare, which means to impart or participate or to transmit. Whereas this word communicare has its root in this word communis, which means to share. Now, let's understand what is communication. Now, communication is the process of sharing, exchanging, conveying ideas, feelings, thoughts, and emotions between two or more persons. So, whenever I am sharing my thought, my feelings with another person, I'm communicating with that person. If I'm exchanging any idea with a group, I'm communicating with the group. If I'm conveying certain valuable thoughts to any other person, I'm communicating. In the second point, we see Keith Davis, Professor of Management at Arizona State University, who defined communication as the process of passing and understanding information from one person to another. Well, this definition in particular emphasizes on the fact that communication is not just passing the information or thought, but also understanding of that particular information. It is also a process of transmitting and receiving verbal and non-verbal messages, and it is only considered effective when it achieves the desired response or reaction from the receiver. Therefore, the response or the feedback mechanism holds a major role in an effective communication. Moving on to the next part, the process of communication. It is basically a two-way process that involves certain elements. The major two elements are the sender and the receiver. The sender is the one who sends the message through a medium and a channel. The receiver is the one who receives the message and then gives back a response or a feedback to the sender. So when the receiver gives back response to the sender, the receiver here becomes sender and the sender here becomes receiver. Therefore, it's a two-way process. Well, are these elements enough for an effective communication? Let's check it out. So, they are not enough. Those are the basic elements for a communication. But for an effective communication, we need something more. Firstly, we need a common frame of reference or context. So, if I am trying to say something and the other person is thinking in completely a different genre altogether, definitely there will be miscommunication. So a common frame of reference is required. A common language is required. So suppose I am speaking in English. Now if you do not understand English, you will not perhaps understand a single word of what I am saying. So we need to know the language, or we need to select the language which is known by both the sender and the receiver. Thirdly, it's common interpretation of the gesture. So gesture varies with communities. So for example, there are communities where saying yes means nodding the head from left to right. Whereas when we say yes, we nod our head up and down. So therefore, here the gesture varies, and if the gesture varies, we will not be able to understand or comprehend what the other person is trying to say. The fourth one is very important. It's the cooperation and understanding between the two persons involved. The two persons here is the sender and the receiver. Doesn't necessarily mean two persons, it can be more than two. Fifth point is selection of an appropriate channel. For an effective communication, it's very important that I select an appropriate channel. I'll come to what is medium and channel. Just let me go back to the previous slide so that I can just give you a brief description of medium and channel. So if medium is abstract, I would say channel is concrete. So for example, medium is whether it's oral or it's written or it's non-verbal. But channel is more concrete. So if medium is written, channel is whether it's letter or email or WhatsApp, that is channel. Or you can also say channel is whether it's electronic media or print media. So channel is more concrete. So if medium is a broader term, then channel is basically something which is under that medium. So medium is basically a broader term including an appropriate channel to succeed. So here, selection of an appropriate channel is also very much important. Suppose I want a job. Now what do I do? Do I write a letter to the HR manager? Do I send an email to the HR manager? Or do I just call and say, hey, I need a job, please give me one? So one has to understand which channel will work better. And last but not the least is the correct encoding and decoding of the message. So encoding and decoding, these are basically encoding of the thoughts and decoding of the message. So if the encoding of the thought and decoding of the message doesn't work properly, therefore we can say that there is a miscommunication. I'll get into this in detail in the next slide. So to understand this, we have to understand the process of communication. Okay, so let's see what is the process of communication all about. Now, basically, the communication process starts with a sender. Here is the sender. So the communication process starts with a sender who has an idea or a thought that he would like to share. What he does is he encodes the thought in a manner so that it can be understood by the receiver. Now, after encoding the thought into a meaningful message, the message is transmitted to the receiver through a channel. Now, there are varieties of channels available to transmit the message, but the most effective one has to be chosen. The next step is receiving the message by the receiver, for whom the message was intended. But only receiving the information is not enough, because he has to understand the message in the same sense as that of the sender. For this purpose, what does the receiver do? He decodes the message and he converts it into thoughts. Now, the whole process of communication is not that easy as it seems. So this is one cycle, or this is half the cycle. Okay, it's one way. After he converts it into thoughts, he again starts with the same mechanism that the sender does here. So this time the receiver becomes the sender. So he encodes the thoughts and then he puts it into a message, which now we call it as a feedback or response. and then he sends it to the sender. The sender this time decodes the message and tries to understand what this person has said. So this is the whole cycle. Therefore, feedback is very essential in a communication. Okay? So there are various stages involved in this communication. What are the stages? First, ideation. What is ideation? Ideation is the first stage where there's an idea or impulse that arises in the sender's mind. The second stage is the encoding, where the idea is formally expressed using a medium and channel. The third is the transmission, where the message travels over a selected channel to the receiver. The fourth is the decoding, where the receiver interprets the message. And the last one is the response or feedback, in which there's a transmission of the receiver's response to the sender. Since I have been saying that feedback is the most important, I would say feedback is the barometer of effective communication. So a communication is said to be fully effective only when a desired response is received. So there can be different kinds of feedbacks. For example, positive feedback. When do we say that we get a positive feedback? When the receiver receives the desired response based on clear understanding of the symbols that are used in the message. So whatever the sender has intended to say is clearly understood by the receiver, and he responds it in the same tone. So that is positive feedback. Negative feedback is undesired response because of miscommunication. So when there is an undesired response, when the receiver fails to understand what the sender has said, there is a miscommunication. It can be due to various reasons, but it's a negative feedback. In fact, sometimes we come across situations where people do not give any feedback. In fact, I would say that is also a sort of feedback. For example, you say something to a friend of yours and the friend goes completely silent. Now, silent has two different meanings. Sometimes, if you agree to something, you go silent. Sometimes, just to show your dissent, you go silent. So, even that is a feedback. And of course, in oral communication, when we are speaking, or when we are in front to front, or when we are when we are conversing with someone, we get immediate feedback because we can understand what the person is feeling or how the person is taking, and we can, try and change the way we are speaking if we somehow get the hint that the person is not being able to understand us. Whereas in written communication, we get a delayed feedback. So this is all about communication today. For any further queries, you can email me at magicmentorlrm3@gmail.com. Thank you.